All right, what is going on, everybody? We got some somewhat breaking news um, that happened a day or two ago. I am pre-recording this, so unless something happens in the next 24 hours, this should be fine. Um, Breaking news is that Jimmy Butler has requested a trade from the Miami Heat. This being reported by Shams Charania and Brian Windhorst over at ESPN. Um, this has been going the the the, the word around has been Jimmy Butler doesn't want to be there, and Shams reported it a couple days ago, not a couple days ago, like week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks ago, and Jimmy Butler's agent came out, believe Bernie Lee or somebody associated with Bernie Lee, came out and said that's not true. You're making up stories, blah blah blah. And Shams fired back at him and said, "No, I don't lie. I have my sources. I'm not going to cite my sources here, but my sources are always reliable." And Shams is right. They are reliable. If you like what I have to say, like the video. If you have your own comments and opinions, comment them down below. And if you just like the vibes, consider subscribing. We got a bunch of stuff to go over here. Just in general, um, I do have both the Miami Heat and Jimmy Butler's basketball reference page pulled up, just for reference. But the first thing I want to go over is the contract that Jimmy Butler is on. I have not hopped into the trade machine and tried to make a trade for Jimmy Butler. Obviously, the word around early on was that it was Golden State, it was Houston, it was Dallas. I think Dallas and Golden State make the most sense. The Rockets dropped out of that conversation very early on after that report was made by Shams. They said they didn't want to do it. Um, so to me, always it was the Mavericks and the Warriors that made the most sense. Maybe the Spurs if they wanted to speed up the timeline a little bit for Victor Wembanyama. But Jimmy's making $48 million, almost $49 million this season. So you have the Warriors are almost a first apron team, so they can't take back a contract more than they already have. So say, for example, Andrew Wiggins is making $48 million. They can do a 1-for-1 trade and get Jimmy Butler. If they aren't, if Andrew Wiggins isn't making $58 million, they can't do the trade because they can't take back. They can't add another. They can't add, let's say, Andrew Wiggins 20 million and somebody else's 30 million, right? And get up to 50. You can't even take back the extra $2 million that Jimmy Butler doesn't have on his contract. So that doesn't work out for the Warriors. I'm only giving this as an example because I think it's important to understand that these mid-season all-star trades don't happen. All NBA caliber player trades don't happen often. At least anymore with the first apron and the second apron NBA era. Um, Now he is scheduled to make. He has a player option for next year, 2025 to 2026, of $52 million. He has been rumored. It has been speculated that he's going to opt out of that deal and try to get a new deal with whatever team trades for him, right? Which, if you want to miss out on $52 million, go ahead, Jimmy. I don't think he's making anywhere near that money. I think he could make somewhere in the low 40s on a specific team if they have that money and the owner wants to spend that and say they go on a finals run and Jimmy performs well, maybe. But I don't think Jimmy's worth $52 million or even $48 million. And I'm a Jimmy Butler fan. I want that to be very clear. I'm a big Jimmy Butler fan. I've been a fan of Jimmy Butler since he got traded to the Minnesota Timberwolves. Um, yeah, I do want to hit on some of Jimmy Butler's highlights, some of his best of his career. Um, Obviously, it started in Chicago. That's where he got his first couple All Star appearances. in 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018. 2018 was Minnesota, pardon me. Um, and then he was never an All Star again until he got to Miami. There were a couple years there where he was in Minnesota, he was in Philly. Philly was a midseason trade in 2018, 2019. And then in 2019, 2020, and 21, 22, he was an All Star for Miami. Um, and some of his best years include a year where he averaged. I should just go with the Heat when he started playing for the Heat. Some of his best years with the Heat, he averaged 22 points, um, two steals, two steals, um, 7 assists, um, almost 7 rebounds. Um, his 2 pointers were money. He's always been money at 2 point range. Um, his three actually improved tremendously while he was in Miami. It jumped all the way from 24% in his first year with Miami to almost 41%. Granted, he only played 60 games, but 41% from three is kind of crazy. So this is the kind of guy teams speculate they're playing that they're gonna get. I don't think Jimmy Butler is that guy anymore, but he definitely is a playoff um, competitor, and that's where he shines the most. I think Jimmy Butler is a ceiling raiser. I think your floor already needs to be high, and then he can raise your ceiling and bring you even higher, in my personal opinion. That's what he tried to do in Minnesota to some success. That's what he did in Philly to some success, and that's what he's done in Miami to some success. Um, and in the Jimmy Butler era, let's see, let's line this up right. So it was 2019, 2020 when he joined the team. Let's see here, 2019, 2020. In Jimmy Butler's Heat tenure, if you can call it that, um, they lost in the finals. They lost in the Eastern Conference Finals first round. That was that year. It wasn't so good. And then they lost in the conference finals um, in 21, 22. They lost in the NBA finals in 22, 23. And they lost in the Eastern Conference Finals first round in 23 and 24. You could say possibly that Jimmy Butler's tenure was martyred by somewhat inconsistent regular season play that led into the playoffs. And when you got to the playoffs, it was either really big hit or really big miss. Um, right now, they're sitting at 17-15 on the season. I don't, I don't think they. Maybe they do get better without Jimmy Butler. Maybe they do get better. I don't know. I don't. It depends. I'm not even gonna speculate on that because it depends what the Heat get back. If they get back another guy, I could see him keeping their head above water, play in possible. Maybe avoid the playing tournament altogether. Um, but let's see here. I'm just trying to see his best season as a Heat, as like their record. Their best season with Jimmy Butler on the roster was 53-29 with a win loss of 64. It's pretty good. That's pretty good. Um, yeah, this situation is sort of awkward because I made a comment on Instagram on one of the posts that reported this last night, and I said Jimmy Butler would be like a a an all time great if he played in the early 2000s to 90s. Because Jimmy Butler is such a hard guy to get along with on the court. He is such a competitor. He is such a nose to the grindstone kind of guy, and I respect that a lot as a viewer, as a watcher, as a as a teammate or as somebody who has to work with him, it probably would get under my skin too. Um, because sometimes he doesn't give it his all. But like with the same token, you flip the token over, he has gotten to heights that a lot of players haven't. You know, he's gotten to he's been the guy on multiple teams. Um, actually, I would say almost every team he's been on, he's been the guy. Granted, the Bulls were a little bit different because he was very early in his career and they were trying to mix and match pieces and this and that. But ever since the Bulls, he's been the guy. On the Minnesota Timberwolves, he was the guy. Minnesota was irrelevant until he got there. And he pushed Carl and he pushed Carl Anthony Towns and he pushed Andrew Wiggins to be better. Um, and then obviously it didn't end well there. Then he went to Philly. He pushed Joel Embiid to be better. He pushed Ben Simmons to be better. Um, and they got to the Eastern. Was that the Eastern Conference Finals? Nevertheless, they lost on a game-winning shot from one of the greatest players ever in Kawhi Leonard. In a game, this in a deciding game. That's neither here nor there. And then with the Heat, he did a lot of things in a Heat jersey that I think people like. Just because he didn't win, people like don't look at it as like a successful tenure with the Heat. Two finals appearances. He was a Eastern Conference Finals MVP, two-time Eastern Conference champion, three-time Eastern Conference Finals appearances. Um, and some Heat fans would tell you he saved the franchise in 2019 because they were in a bad place. I looked at some of those rosters last night between when D Wade left and he was sort of injured or injured and then left, and then when they got Jimmy Butler, it was bad. It was a bad time, and I think we can sort of what's it called bring this conversation into a bigger light and to say that maybe it wasn't all Jimmy Butler's fault that the teams weren't always competitive and the teams lost in the first round sometimes. That you could say it was somewhat the I think he's the GM, right? That's his title, the GM or president of basketball operations, Pat Riley, the great Pat Riley, um, who I have a lot of respect for as well. But maybe let me roll it back a little bit. In my experience as a fan, the the Heat were always they're in talks, they're in talks, they're in talks, and it was always it was Kevin Durant, it was Damian Lillard, it was oh we could get this guy, we're trying to get this guy, and then they just couldn't get it done. You know, it was they were just reluctant to give up Tyler Hero, whoever was on the roster at the time. They were just reluctant to give up these guys for a defining all star. And I get you drafted Tyler Hero, you want him to be your homegrown star, and I guess you waited and it worked out because he is going to be there. If you trade Jimmy Butler, you kind of have to keep Tyler Hero and Bam together. But with the with, at the same time, you could have had Jimmy and you could have had him stay longer with another co-star. And we can get into Bam Adebayo in a minute, but I don't want to spend too much time on uh, just dissing Pat Riley here. But Pat is very reluctant. He's come out and he said, I think it was on um, Udonis Haslam's and Mike Miller's podcast, where he said it's hard to trade guys. You don't want to trade guys, you know. And then he's a bit older and maybe he's a bit senile and maybe a bit losing a little bit. But man, you got to make those moves. If you're a GM, you have to go for it. My train of thought on this channel is I'd rather see a team go for it, just go all in, than say, oh well, we could have done this, we could have done that. Just do it. Take the gamble and do it. And if it doesn't work out, at least you did it. Right? Right? Like, come on. But just reflecting on Jimmy's tenure a little bit more, um, spoke on Tyler Hero, who this year has grown into a real all-star sort of talks, um, but also Bam Adebayo, who in the Jimmy Butler tenure was never, in my opinion, was never had moments, but was never really the number two guy. He never reached that. He never got over the hump to be the number two guy. He was always he's. I don't want to. I like Bam. I really do. But sometimes you just want a little bit more. He just could never give you that little bit more that you wanted. You know, like in a closeout game, he might have given you 20, 10 rebounds, 7 assists, 2 blocks, 2 steals, and you lost the game. And you're like, you could have given me 30. Why didn't you give me 30? We still would have lost, but at least you would have shown me that you could have had 30. In these closeout games, and I feel kind of weird saying that, but I think it's important to have context for the Jimmy Butler era. Um, yeah, I think that's really all I can think of right now. Um, I think this era of Heat basketball was very interesting. Um, I think Jimmy, I think Jimmy at the end was very hurt by Pat Riley's words. Um, I think that was last season or season before, where Pat Riley basically said, "Shut up and dribble." Like if you're not playing. Well, Jimmy Butler wasn't even playing; he was injured, and he was talking stuff to the Celtics or whoever they were playing, and Pat Riley was like, "Just shut up, please, just shut up." And I just think Jimmy wears his heart on his sleeve, and he's an emotional guy. And I think he values personal relationships, and I think once you burn a bridge with Jimmy, it's just over. Um, and that might be good or bad. And I've seen a lot of conversations about this is his after the Bulls. This is the Timberwolves, Philly. This would be his going on his fourth team after he leaves the Heat. There's been a conversation that Jimmy Butler is just he has to look in the mirror and he is the problem. I don't think he's the problem. Well, I don't think he's the problem unless you want to make him the problem. You know what I mean? Like I don't want. Maybe isn't the situation where he was the scapegoat, but you look at his exit in Minnesota. They kind of blamed him for being too hard on Carl and being too hard on Wiggins, and now in 2025, you look back on that and you see both. Carl is in New York on a great team, really a different version of himself. Andrew Wiggins moved on to the Warriors, and became an NBA champion and a vital piece of a finals team. Um, so maybe, and the Timberwolves chose Anthony Edwards and Rudy Gobert. Looking way back on it, that's who they chose. And they're not doing too good either, but neither here nor there. And you look at his time in Philadelphia. Philadelphia has been through so many coaches and so many iterations of the Joel Embiid teams, of Jimmy Butler, of Markel Fultz and Ben Simmons and James Harden and and those guys and that team. And now you have Paul George and Tyrese Maxey, and maybe Jimmy just has bad luck picking a team. Has bad luck going to teams, and maybe the issues that are already there with the team are just heightened because Jimmy just sees the BS and is like, what the heck is going on here? You know? Maybe that's the case. I don't know. I don't know. But it will be fun to see the next couple weeks as as trade season approaches. Um, and we get to see where Jimmy Butler goes. Phoenix was also a destination, but that seems to have shut down as well. Um, yeah, I that's really it. I this is going to be a very interesting, or maybe not so interesting, trade deadline because he might get traded, or he might just be told to go home if they don't trade him because it's getting ugly. The one thing I want to say is that he said after the loss last night to the Pacers, I believe they played. He said, "I just want to find my joy again for basketball, of course." Um, and I just thought that was very Jimmy, and that was very subtly like I'm not having fun anymore sort of quote. So that's that. Um, yeah, let me know what you think about the Jimmy Butler situation. Like the video, subscribe, and yeah, I'll see you on the next one. Cheers.